Accepted.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the session. So I hope you enjoy Devoxx. In my case, it's my first time in Poland, and the weather is really great. Today, we're going to deep dive in a new way to use state management. It's called Signals. And just to warn you, we're going to do the presentation with React framework, but Signals are also available in other frameworks like Angular or Vue.js or whatever. Speaking of that, yesterday we did have a really good presentation of Signals with Angular did by Loïc Magnette. So if you want to have more explanation with Angular, you can get Loïc presentation on his GitHub. So, okay, let's go. My name is Estelle. I'm from Paris. I worked as a software development engineer at Criteo. Criteo is an ad tech company leader in retail media and retargeting.
And I'm Henry, so I'm a software engineer at Datadog. So for those who don't know, it's a SaaS platform that allows you to monitor your app anywhere, at any scale, anytime, to be sure that everything is working, so it's pretty nice. But today we are not talking about that, so.
Okay, so before we start, I will ask you some questions. Some of the classical, please put your hands up. So please raise your hand if you have already worked with React. Okay. Keep your hands up if you have already used state management with React.
Like Redux or whatever.
Okay. So probably a lot of you know what I mean by the mess that it can be to use context providers. And for those who didn't know yet what it is, we will explain it like now.
Okay. So I will just re-explain briefly how a React app works. So we have just basically a root component and some child component. And when we want to put a state somewhere, it will re-render the component and this child component every time that the state change. For now, nothing new. But at a point, maybe you will want to put the same state at two different places. So what happened? You just put the state at the top component, and you would re-render the whole app. Not really efficient in terms of rendering and speed of the app. So what we just do, basically, we put some context. Or we maybe will use some state management like Redux. And the context will propagate the state directly to the components that need it, avoiding re-rendering the different components that are a child component of them. But at a point, you will have multiple contexts for multiple states that will maybe, in some component, will maybe need multiple context and multiple states to be rendered. And so every time that your context change, you end up with the same problem. You will render all the child component. But also, we have another problem. For those who know, this is what your root app will look like at the end. You don't know what is going on. You have a lot of providers. It's messy to understand what is interacting with what. And so signals appear like the perfect solution.
Ta-da! So what are signals? Signals, in 2 words, is simple and efficient. Signals is like an object with a dot value property that can be read and updated. It represents a piece of the state. So what concretely does it mean? If we took the previous example, with signals, you do not have to render your component, the parent component and its child. You do not have to render the component at all. In fact, you directly update what's the part that subscribes to the signals will automatically detect the update of the value, and that's it. You do not have to handle complex array dependency and so on, and you are ensured that you are using the latest state. Note that, as I said during the introduction, signals can be used with React with a third-party library like Preact, but it also exists in other frameworks. And in the case of Angular, it's really at the core of the framework. It's explored at native in the framework.
So we'll just try to compare a bit signals and hooks, because for now, it just seems like signals is perfect. So first, hooks and signals work kind of the same way. It means that they will respond to data change or state in order to re-render or update the component.
About the rendering, we saw just before in the example that for signals, we do not render the component. It's really at data level, compared to hooks where you need to render the parent and the child.
But in terms of maturity, it's a really recent concept, the signals. It comes from a third-party library in React, from Preact. But hooks are a standard feature from 2019. Even though not everyone likes them, they are pretty used.
With signals, you are not limited to the scope of the component. You can use the signals everywhere in your project, where with React hooks, you are limited to the component.
And finally, even though maybe it will change with the latest release of React, thanks to the compiler, but with signals, you don't have to say the dependencies. So all the dependencies are automatically detected, and you don't have to pass an array of dependencies that maybe you will put too much dependencies, not enough, or whatever, and so your component will end up re-rendering even though it doesn't need to re-render. This screenshot is from the Preact website. This is on the right side, you have the optimized VDOM thanks to signals, whereas on the left side, it's used hooks. So we directly see that the re-rendering and the scripting are much faster. It divides by approximately 6 times the time to load the app. And how they end up that? It's thanks to everything is lazy by default. So even though your signal is not used, it won't impact your dependencies and your app. Only the signals that are used and that need to be updated will impact the rendering of your app. Everything is, all the updates are optimal, and only if the value of the component change, you will re-render the app. You have some dependency tracking. As I mentioned before, you don't have to declare them. Everything is built in. And you directly access the value and not through a method or through hooks.
Okay, so before we go to the live demo, we will have a quick look on the basic of signals, how to use it, how to initiate the value. So first, you import the signals from your favorite library. Here it's Preact. Then you, in the constant, so it's a constant called count here, you initiate the value with 0, but it can be, in fact, whatever you want. It can be a function, for example. And then you use the .value property of the signals with count.value here to increment it, and you just display the count if you want to display the value of the count. If you want to use the signals in another component, you want to subscribe in another component, simply put the signals in a separate file, and you need to import it and directly use it. That's it. So there is anything else you need to do, no dependency array or whatever. And in the same way as in React hooks, we do have methods like use effects. So here it's called effects. So it will be triggered as soon as there is an update on the value.
Okay, enough talking. Now we'll try some real example on how signals works and how you can maybe update your app to use signals. So I will use a really simple example. So it will be just the famous to-do app that you find on any documentation how you start to learn a new framework. But this to-do app will first use some hooks, and then we'll try together to migrate it to signals. So I set up a bit of code, to not start from nothing. So we'll have a navbar, a to-do list, so two different components that are rendered in the app. The navbar, for now, just displays two links, to-dos and user. It does really nothing. And the to-do list allows you to add some to-dos, to check them if you have finished your to-do, and also how it instantiates the state. It will get from the local storage the key to-dos and return it directly in your application. Oops, it's better if I launch my app. Perfect. So first we will check that it's working. So hello Devoxx. Okay, everything is working perfectly, I want to say. It's a great app. So you can check and everything is working. I also put some console log just to be sure and to see when and what components are rendering when you are doing an action. So in our case, when we are adding something, our to-do list is rendering, and when we are changing the checked, our to-do list is also rendering. But now, I would like in my navbar to put the number of completed tasks as an header. Say, I completed 3 tasks, 5, or whatever. So my state is from now in the to-do list, but I will have to put it directly in the app. So I'll just import all the missing stuff. And I will pass it in my different component. So set to-dos, and same thing for the app. So what will happen here, as you may guess, basically, we'll have everything re-rendering every time that something is updating. Okay? But we will check that. To-dos, to-do, and it's an array. Up. Value, to-do, and void. Okay. So I will just copy-paste that and put it in the navbar too. Okay, just import the different type. And so here I will just display an H2 with, so completed. It will be the number of to-dos, so I will just filter them. To-do that completed, and so I will take the length of it. Okay? Still nothing really fancy, let's be honest. So now, when I have something completed and I check it, the number is changing here, and we can see that directly all the app is rendering. Render app, navbar, to-do list, even though when I'm adding a new to-do, everything is rendering. So we have a big issue in terms of rendering. I will do also something else, because I told you that we will maybe want to save the to-dos in the local storage. So only what I will do is just create a use effect that will put the to-dos in the local storage. And so I will put as a dependency the to-dos. Okay? So like so, when I'm adding something and I'm refreshing, my to-dos are still saved. Okay, perfect. So now we have kind of the basic app with the number of completed and the number of to-dos. and the different to-dos. So now, let's create some signals, okay? So as Estelle mentioned, to create a signals, we just import signals from Preact, so the type, and we can instantiate it with anything. So in our case, it will be get to-dos, and if we look of our app, in the app, we'll just take this function, okay? So we'll just declare the get to-dos, and so it will instantiate my signals to-dos with what is in the local storage. Okay, so now that I've created my to-do, I will need to update my different apps, my different components to use these signals. So follow me because it will be really complex, okay? So I'll just remove all that part. We don't need it anymore because we want to use signals. You follow me? I will import it from the signal file, use the .value property to loop on it. Okay, for now, everything seems pretty clear, pretty easy. Now we need to update the to-dos, so because we want to add a new one. So same thing, .value equal, and if you follow me, here I will put the .value too. Okay. So now we can add a new to-do, and it will be linked to the signal. Same thing here. .value equal, so I'm just reassigning some value. I'm just reassigning the value directly, and so everything should work the same way. Like if it was of constant or any kind of constant or property. So now, when I'm adding something, it's still working, perfect. But as you can see, the completed doesn't update, of course. It's not the same state. So first, let's remove that. We don't need it anymore. We want to use some signals now. So I'll just remove all of this. I will go to my navbar. I will remove this property. And I will import my to-do directly from my signal value. If it doesn't exist. And so as you can see, everything is rendering perfectly, and the number is changing. But if we look carefully, we are still a re-rendering issue. Okay? I'm adding something, and it's still re-render my navbar. But the value of the signal didn't change. The number of completed didn't change. So it shouldn't re-render. But at least now we don't re-render the app. Something really powerful with signals is that you can derive signals into a new one. So you can either combine them, create a new one, or just compute them from an old to-do. So in our case, we'll just compute a new signal based on the number of completed to-dos. So how we can do that? We'll just declare a new signal. So number of completed to-dos. Seems correct. I will import the function computed, and this function allows me to derive my to-do. So I just provide a function, and the value will be the number of to-dos that are completed. And so now I just need to use this new signal instead of the to-dos directly. Okay? And so when I'm adding something new, only my to-do list is re-rendering. I don't know if you can see. No. Only my to-do list is rendering, and not my navbar when I'm adding a new to-do. When I'm checking, when I'm updating it, as you can see, still only my to-do list is rendering and not my navbar. That's pretty neat, no?
Ta-da!
So that's pretty cool. But we still lost a big feature. I mean, our app is still pretty nice, but we lost the big feature. We didn't save anything in our local storage. Okay? So let's use the effect, as Estelle mentioned. We'll import effect from Signal. He wants to shorten my talk, GitHub Copilot, but and I will import my to-dos from my Signal file, and this effect will be triggered anytime that the to-do is changed. But as you can see, it's outside of the component, so it shouldn't re-render the component. Okay? And also, we don't have this nice dependency array. So let's continue. If I'm adding something, to-dos change. Okay. If I'm checking in my local storage, we still see all my to-dos. If I'm updating something, the values are updating, and only my to-do list change. So now we have an app that only the component where we change, or really change and add something new, so we need the app to be reactive, will be re-rendered and not the whole application. So, to sum up, what we have seen. We have seen how to create a signal, how to use effect to apply some function when something new appears, and how to compute derived signals that that only the value change, and so maybe you don't need to render the whole app.
Okay, thanks, Henry. So we saw how signals is sharp and how efficient it can be to use signals. So I'm sure that now you are really hurried to change your application, throw away everything you know about React hooks and use signals straight away. But of course, it's a joke, because we need to remember that signals is still at an early stage, and React hooks is something that it's much more mature than signals. We have a big support group contributing to React hooks, and regarding the tools for debugging and testing, it's not yet ready for signals. So yes, signals is a very good way to use state management. Probably it will be used more and more, but for now the preferred choice still remain the React hooks. Thanks for joining the session. It was a pleasure to be there. So Henri Lagarde and myself.
If you want the slide, it's on my GitHub, so you can just follow the links. There is also the slide of my other talks, and you can follow us on Twitter, X, whatever you want, or LinkedIn. Thank you.